fresh trade war between the US and China has just kicked off.
Land. He also has repeated his threat of 100% tariffs for BRICS nations if they come up with their own currency to replace the US.
In 2024, President Donald Trump made a bold and controversial move that set the stage for an economic showdown with rising global powers. He issued a stern warning to the nations of BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. His ultimatum was crystal clear. Any country that creates or supports a currency designed to challenge the US dollar would face immediate 100% tariffs on their exports to the United States. More than just an economic policy, Trump's message was a declaration of war against any financial system attempting to dethrone the dollar as the world's reserve currency. Trump's stance was built on the idea that the US dollar isn't just a currency, it's a symbol of America's global dominance. For decades, the dollar has been the backbone of the international financial system, enabling the United States to exert tremendous influence across the globe. Under Trump's leadership, there was an unwavering commitment to protecting that dominance, even at the cost of provoking key global players. He didn't just make this announcement once. Trump repeatedly broadcasted his message across social media and public speeches, signaling to the world that the US would not tolerate any challenge to the dollar's supremacy. The underlying message was simple: challenge the dollar, and you challenge America's economic power. For Trump, this wasn't merely about economics. It was a matter of national security and pride. But, as history has shown, issuing ultimatums often leads to unexpected consequences. And as we'll see, BRICS was quick to respond. BRICS nations didn't take Trump's threats lying down. Brazil, which holds the rotating chair of BRICS in 2024, became the first to openly challenge the US on this front. As a powerful emerging economy, Brazil's response to Trump's ultimatum was nothing short of defiant. The country dismissed Trump's warnings and quickly rolled out an ambitious financial plan to undermine the US dollar's dominance in global trade. Brazil, known for its Pix payment platform, which had already amassed over 150 million users domestically, unveiled plans to expand this platform to handle international transactions. In doing so, Brazil took the first steps toward bypassing the US dollar entirely. The move was significant not just because it was happening in Latin America, but because it represented the first salvo in what would soon become a broader BRICS-led financial rebellion. At the same time, Brazil launched a cross-border payment system called SML, which utilized the Brazilian real to facilitate transactions between Brazil and neighboring countries like Argentina, Uruguay, and Paraguay. While the processing speeds were initially modest, the broader goal was clear: create a system that could bypass the US dollar entirely. Pix and SML weren't just local experiments. They were bold steps to establish a new global financial infrastructure that didn't rely on the US dollar or the global financial institutions that have long been under American control. But Brazil didn't stop there. Brazil's plans to integrate real-time payment systems meant that over time, it could build a global payment platform that was not only fast and efficient, but also independent of the US dollar. What's more, Brazil wasn't working alone. Other BRICS nations quickly followed suit with their own plans to reduce dependence on the dollar. Together, they were laying the groundwork for a new global financial order that doesn't center around the United States. One of the most significant moves by BRICS nations in their bid to dethrone the US dollar is the massive gold accumulation that has been quietly taking place over the past 2 years. In total, BRICS countries have stockpiled over 5,700 tons of gold, a monumental feat that signals their intention to protect their economies from external economic pressures and potential monetary manipulation. Gold is no longer viewed as just a store of value or a symbol of wealth. For BRICS, it's a financial shield against the uncertainty of the global economic system, which has long been dominated by the US dollar. By accumulating gold, BRICS nations are ensuring that they have an asset that can hold its value even in the face of potential currency fluctuations and global crises. In short, they're building a gold-backed financial infrastructure as a form of self-reliance, a way to shield their economies from the instability of the world's current financial system, which is heavily reliant on the US dollar. But gold isn't the only weapon in BRICS's arsenal. These nations are also establishing new trade agreements to bypass the US dollar entirely. For instance, China and Brazil have signed agreements to settle trade in their respective currencies, the yuan and the real, skipping the US dollar altogether. This is a significant move that signals a shift away from the dollar in global trade and shows how both China and Brazil are positioning themselves as central players in a new financial order. Russia and Iran have also joined the fight by linking their banking systems, executing bilateral transactions without the need for SWIFT, the global payment system that is heavily tied to the US dollar. India and Russia, in turn, have begun conducting oil transactions in rupees and rubles, marking another step away from dollar dominance in global energy markets. Each of these moves represents a strategic decision to reduce reliance on the US dollar and to create financial systems that are independent of American influence. What we're witnessing is not just a financial shift, but a systemic change in how global economies approach trade, finance, and currency. Trump's aggressive trade policies and tariff threats haven't just angered foreign nations. They've also begun to backfire on the US economy itself. Within just 24 hours of Trump's 100% tariff announcement, the Nasdaq fell 2%, and the S&P 500 dropped over 1%. The Atlanta Fed's GDP Now model predicted a negative growth of 1.8% for Q1 2025, raising fears of stagflation, a scenario in which the economy contracts while inflation rises. These economic indicators were a wake-up call for investors, who began questioning the long-term sustainability of US economic policy. One of the hardest-hit sectors was the stock market, which relies heavily on global trade and investment. Investors who had once viewed the US dollar as a stable asset were now reconsidering their position. The reality is that as the dollar loses global trust, the US economy could face more severe repercussions, including a rise in inflation, a decline in the competitiveness of American goods, and a potential slowdown in global trade. The underlying question that now looms large is this: has the US dollar become a political weapon? Trump's use of tariffs as a political tool could be backfiring on the US, turning what was once the most trusted currency in the world into a source of economic instability. If nations around the world start losing faith in the dollar, it could result in a massive economic crisis for the United States, one that is far greater than any trade war with individual countries. The impact of Trump's tariff policies is also being felt in key US industries, and one of the most visible examples is the struggling Tesla brand in Europe. The electric vehicle giant, once seen as a symbol of American innovation, is facing increasing backlash from European consumers and investors. In Denmark, a major pension fund sold off its Tesla shares, citing concerns over poor governance and Elon Musk's controversial political stances. The consequences of Tesla's European troubles extend beyond just the company itself. Europe's response to Trump's trade policies has been significant. The European Union, already upset by Trump's aggressive tariffs on European products, has indicated that it will not stand idly by. EU leaders are openly discussing retaliatory tariffs on products from American states that are particularly loyal to Trump's administration. This includes agricultural goods and high-end automobiles, sectors in which the US has significant exports to Europe. Trump's trade policies have not only alienated Europe, but have also exposed cracks in America's once stable relationship with its closest allies. These cracks are most apparent in Tesla's loss of market share in Norway, where the company's presence in the electric vehicle market dropped drastically in just 1 year, from 21.7% to 7.4%. Tesla is also facing increasing regulatory scrutiny from European authorities as they take a closer look at the company's labor practices and the safety of its vehicles. Tesla's struggles underscore a much bigger issue. America's economic policies under Trump have created an atmosphere of global resentment. Whether it's Tesla or other key US industries, the broader trend is clear. Trump's tariffs and political rhetoric are starting to turn American brands into pariahs in international markets. In the wake of President Donald Trump's aggressive trade policies, the United States found itself embroiled in a series of economic and political challenges that reverberated across the nation. The administration's decision to impose a 10% baseline tariff on all imports, with significantly higher rates for key trading partners, sent shockwaves through various sectors of the economy. While the intent was to bolster domestic manufacturing and address trade imbalances, the immediate effects were far from favorable. The American public's reaction to these policies was swift and pronounced. A Reuters Watch Ipsos poll conducted in early April 2025 revealed that President Trump's approval rating had plummeted to 43%, the lowest since his return to office. The survey highlighted growing discontent over the administration's handling of the economy, with only 37% approving of Trump's economic stewardship and a mere 30% expressing satisfaction with his management of the cost of living. Concerns were particularly acute regarding the potential for rising consumer prices due to the newly imposed tariffs. The international community's response to the U.S. tariffs was one of widespread criticism and concern. Leaders from various countries condemned the move, fearing it would disrupt global trade and economic stability. For instance, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney vowed countermeasures to protect Canadian workers, while Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese deemed the tariffs illogical and harmful to global stability. Closer to home, Mexico chose a different path. President Claudia Sheinbaum announced that Mexico would not engage in retaliatory tariffs against the United States. Instead, she emphasized a strategy focused on a comprehensive economic protection plan, aiming to shield the Mexican economy from potential U.S. actions without escalating tensions. This approach contrasted with Canada's more confrontational stance and earned Sheinbaum high approval ratings domestically. The trade policies also had tangible negative impacts on U.S. industries. Japanese automakers, such as Nissan, Honda, and Toyota, faced significant challenges due to the new 25% tariffs on auto imports. These tariffs threatened the affordability of vehicles produced in Mexico and exported to the U.S., potentially leading to price increases on economy models that traditionally attracted price-sensitive buyers. Nissan, in particular, stood to be heavily affected, given its substantial reliance on the U.S. market and Mexican production. Furthermore, the ocean shipping industry experienced heightened volatility and reduced certainty in supply chain management. Companies were increasingly resorting to expensive air shipping alternatives to circumvent tariffs, leading to increased operational costs and potential disruptions in global trade. Domestically, the trade policies sparked legislative action. The U.S. Senate passed legislation aimed at terminating the new tariffs on Canada, reflecting bipartisan concern over the economic ramifications of the administration's approach. However, with the House of Representatives unlikely to approve the measure, the future of the tariffs remained uncertain, contributing to an atmosphere of economic unpredictability. In summary, the initial phase of President Trump's trade policies led to significant domestic and international challenges. While intended to protect and promote American industries, the tariffs resulted in economic disruptions, strained international relations, and a decline in presidential approval ratings. As the situation evolved, the nation faced the complex task of navigating the economic and political consequences of these unprecedented trade measures. In the face of escalating trade tensions and economic uncertainties, both the U.S. government and private sector entities sought strategies to mitigate the adverse effects of the newly imposed tariffs. The challenge was to balance the administration's protectionist objectives with the need to maintain economic stability and growth. Recognizing the potential for economic downturn, the administration explored policy adjustments aimed at alleviating the negative impacts of tariffs. Discussions focused on targeted relief measures for industries most affected, such as automotive and agriculture. Additionally, efforts were made to expedite trade negotiations with key partners to seek exemptions and reduce tariff rates. However, these initiatives faced political hurdles, with debates over fiscal responsibility and the long-term implications of such policies. Businesses, particularly those in manufacturing and retail, were compelled to adapt swiftly to the changing trade landscape. Strategies included diversifying supply chains to countries not affected by U.S. tariffs, investing in automation to reduce production costs, and exploring new markets to offset potential losses from traditional trading partners. Companies also engaged in lobbying efforts to influence trade policy decisions and secure favorable terms. The American public's perception of the trade policies played a crucial role in shaping the economic environment. As consumer prices began to rise due to tariffs, public dissatisfaction grew, influencing purchasing behaviors and contributing to a decline in consumer confidence. This shift had a cascading effect on retail and service industries, prompting calls for policy reassessment. On the international front, efforts were made to resolve trade disputes through established mechanisms such as the World Trade Organization, WTO. Countries affected by U.S. tariffs, including Canada and Mexico, sought dispute resolution processes to challenge the legality of the measures. These proceedings aimed not only to address immediate concerns, but also to establish precedents for international trade norms. Looking beyond the immediate turmoil, discussions emerged about the need for structural reforms in U.S. trade policy. Proposals included comprehensive reviews of existing trade agreements, consideration of new trade partnerships, and reforms aimed at enhancing the competitiveness of American industries in the global market. One thing is clear: the global financial system is undergoing a transformation. The U.S. is facing unprecedented challenges to its economic dominance, and its current policies are stirring up global resistance. The next few years will determine whether America can reclaim its position as the leader of the global economy, or if the world will chart a new course. Stay tuned as the economic landscape continues to evolve. What happens next could reshape everything we know about the future of global trade and currency.